for being here. Hi, my name is Susie Brandt, and I'm so amazed to see you all here. I thought, it's hot, and things aren't going to come out, it's going to be fine. So thank you. Thank you for being here. I'm thrilled. And I thought, wow, this is like not like a regular slide talk. We just get to talk about what's here. And I'm not going to project any images or anything like that. And yes, come on. There's chairs. And we can find more. I was imagining, wouldn't it be great if we were all on moving chairs? So this is like we all had. I thought I would talk about like how this all came about. I'll start with that. And I'll talk about things in chronological order because the work here is recent and some of it's kind of old. So I was thrilled to be offered this exhibition, and it was last fall that I was offered, I think like end of the summer, last fall, something like that. And I thought, oh my gosh, a solo exhibition in Maine in 6 months? What am I going to do? Because I knew, and I came to the gallery and I was so thrilled. Like I thought, and yeah, a cat was here, and I was running around going, oh my god, and I was trying to imagine where I could put everything, and and then what would the show be? Because I knew I couldn't make a solo show in that amount of time, just brand new work. I just knew I could, but I thought there's all this stuff, I've got to get it to me because I'm just moving to me. So I thought, and I was around all last summer in Rockland. I'm living in Rockland, and I'm looking around, and there's all these shows that are it's all landscape painting. So I thought I'm going to have a landscape show because if there's a this is my landscape show. But because there's a theme that runs through my work all these years about the place where I am, or the circumstances that I'm in, or I grew up in upstate New York in the southern Adirondacks, which is very much like Maine, and my parents built a ski area. That was my childhood, was the taking down of trees and the putting up of chairlifts. And knowing a lot about the seasons, knowing when the hepaticas come up in the spring, and just all kinds of, like a deep knowledge about the place that I was at. And so, then I moved around a lot because I wanted to get away from that as a kid. I couldn't wait to leave, even though it was idyllic and all that. So I've lived in a bunch of places, and those places have often become part of my work. Or I think that the place I am, the circumstances drive things. So that's what Whereabouts was the name. I was like, gotta have a title. So Whereabouts is it's kind of like, I couldn't say landscape because it would just disappoint people when they came in and be like, where's the ocean? So I thought really like the places, placemaking, responding to places, there's often just a theme in the work. But in so many other things too. And then I thought I would also just stop for a second and tell you, feel free to interrupt. The oldest thing, I think the oldest thing here is here, it's these water towers. Because originally, these came from a project they did with my sister Susie Brandt. I mean, actually, the whole first 20 years of my life is, or I don't know, 15 or 20 years is in a book back there. So I'm not going to talk about that. There's a book. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. But it's Barbie clothes quilt on the cover. So if you want to know about all this, that before this stuff. And then in the 90s, I worked a lot with my sister Susie Brandt, and we made one of our first, our second big project, we made the Adirondack Mountains in a gallery in New York called Art in General. We recreated the Adirondacks. And one of the things we did is we painted all the walls with this camouflage pattern that had all the great things about the Adirondacks and all the kind of not so great And then later we were asked to do a landscape show somewhere, and we took that pattern, and this is our friend Richard Carey's first Photoshop project. So these water towers went up on the highway, and we said, oh, then people were so mad because they were ruining the landscape, and we said, well, look, here's our proposal for how to make them merge with the landscape. So we never did this, but I have projected this image many times, and people have told me they have seen it. Anyway, and then a few years ago, I was living in Lake Luzerne, New York, and there's all these dilapidated houses on the main street. So we pulled this out, and we got Richard Carey to apply it to all the godforsaken houses on that street, because we thought it would be a beautiful proposal. And then I just took these and put them in all the postcard racks, so all the stores in town are selling these. So that's what this is all about. And it's kind of like what we can do to solve the problem of let's take down those houses, but not also. Anyway, so that was just but that's the oldest work in the place. And then probably the second oldest is what's in the window. And if you haven't seen the window, it's a series of screen printed. They're screen printed fabrics, and I made them when I first was living in Baltimore. Baltimore is the last city I lived in before I moved to Rockland. And I taught at a college, and when I first got there, I didn't have a studio, so I took a class. And I took a screen printing class, and we screen printed out fabric, and I took it from Piper Shepherd, my colleague. And I loved it so much, and I loved being a student so much. And it was such a great semester, and I learned like crazy. But what I was doing is, that's not the first work I made, and I had to learn a lot of things before I got to that, but that's the Four Seasons in saw blades. I think of it as like Marimekko for the Adirondacks. And I was in some show, and I needed to make a big piece for a show, so that was the piece I made. I showed it once before the show. Yeah, so and one of the things that I love doing is so I would shoot screens directly with saw blades or flat things. So a lot of the work I make, you see, I don't make pictures. I find all the imagery pretty much. So I'm not original in that way. I'm not a picture maker. But at first, before I did those, I did record albums. I did 33s and 78s and 45s because they're flat and you get them at the thrift store. And then they have that hole in the middle. And then I started. So those also have gaskets and other things. So they make these great polka dots.
Are your hands and arms related because they're sort of flat things that are always available?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Is that the main reason?
Yeah. And that's a tracing of my body in there too. So,
yeah.
Yeah. It's like everything's found. Really. So what did I do after that? So then this thing is probably next, and they kind of coincide because before I lived in Baltimore, I lived in Philadelphia, and there was a show of my work in the airport in Philadelphia. There's a great airport exhibition there. And, but I had moved out of town by then. But we had email, and somebody saw my email address and sent me an email, and they said, my mother has died, and she was a home ec teacher, and there's all this fabric, and would you be interested in coming to see the fabric? And I was like, okay. So I got in my big red vehicle, whatever it was back then, Chevy Blazer, I had a Chevy Blazer red. And I drove it across the Delmarva Peninsula, and I went to Rehoboth Beach where his mother had lived, and the house was unbelievably full of fabric, just unbelievably full of fabric. And I just, I was like, oh, look at this, I love this kind of thing. And one of the things was, there were all this polka dot fabric. There was lots and lots of polka dot clothes, and you could tell that she had made those clothes, I can tell I was a child sewer. So, and I just filled my car. And I brought a lot of stuff, there was just all kinds of stuff, and I brought a lot of it to school because I was teaching in a fiber program at the Maryland Institute College of Art. And so, students always love that free stuff, but I kept all the polka dots. And I didn't know it, you know, like, so it took me a few years of things. Like, there could be a whole show of the steps that I took to get here. Like, and then probably like the drawing version of textiles is samples. And there's a giant box of samples before that happened. And so that's, so these are cut out with pinking shears. And so everybody wants to know the magic trick. They're cut out with pinking shears, and they're stitched onto water-soluble laundry bags that are used in hospitals. And they're stitched, and it's stitched, so I think I actually licked them and stuck them on. And so they're sort of stuck on, they dried, and then I sewed over them with clear thread, and then dissolved the laundry bag. But I made it, and then I made it in chunks, because you can't get that much in the sewing machine, and then just put them all together. And the magic trick of this one was I had made a bunch of these kinds of things, and they were just all scattered around, you know. But when I made them in order, they're like, these are actually strung up in order, and you can kind of start to see it here. They're like, they make little strings of order, and that kind of made it like more cohesive piece. So that's that one. And I was also, I think, at that time really interested in how little you can make something, like, or how so it's titled Smidge. It's just a smidge. You know, like, you can't, I think I was really interested in the idea of almost nothing. So it's found, yeah, I don't know what else to say about this one, but it's so great to put it up again. I haven't had it out in a long time. So and Katerina, I'm just going to say Katerina Wesley was looking over my pictures, and I had made things in the gallery and everything. She says, put that one there, put that one there. And she was so right. And I was like, okay. We had all, you know, it was like, just when I was just about, you know, my head was popping over what was going to happen with the show. She set me straight.
The stitching is, you did all the stitching.
It's sewn on a sewing machine.
And then what did you do? You washed it and then
Yeah,
the
just melted away.
away.
The bags melt away. It's a thing in sewing that people do, but they're usually puny little things, and I have to make things kind of big. I mean, I don't know why. And I think of this as, so as far as landscape goes, I think of this as kind of atmosphere, or rain, or, you know, something like that. You know, so I thought, oh, works for the landscape show, doesn't it?
Were you thinking about the shadows that you created?
Yeah, that's why it hangs out from the wall. I mean, yeah, I think I've made things a lot for the wall. I mean, for a long time I made things to go on the wall, which is the sacred space of art, is the wall.
So were the bags just to get that structure while you were working on it?
Yeah, and then it just, yeah, so that I could sew everything
This
down.
was there as well, that layer that they're now floating on was there at the same time?
No, I just put them on there, and this is clear thread. This is just clear nylon
Okay,
thread,
got it.
so that it's like, becomes like weird little atmosphere. No. So, and that was in an embroidery show at the Museum of Art and Design once, called Extreme Embroidery or something like that. Or like, I don't know, laser, I don't know what show it was. Yeah, come on, we're giving you a chair. Thanks for being here. Okay, so that's the next one. Where are we now in chronology? Maybe this piece over here, which is also done in that same way, except it's regular sewing machine thread. And I sort of imagined there would be 4 people here. Just walk around. There are 4 people here, but then there's all these other people too. But this thing is made. This thing is in 2010. I had been demoted I've been demoted from being the chair of my department. You know, like I've been demoted to chair, which I thought was like, which is a colossal failure in academia as far as I was concerned. And I was having a, you know, like. And so I was like, oh, what am I doing? And I have to be, you can tell I'm kind of got this industrious thing going on. So, and I was living in Baltimore, and I decided and I had thought about this piece, actually when I was in grad school in the 80s, I wanted to walk everywhere in Chicago. But then I thought, there was no way, well, I'll just do that, and so what? There's a bunch of walking work, and I know about that work. But when I saw GPS, I was like, oh my God, you can prove it. And so you can take a walk and prove it with the GPS tracks. I was like, wow, that's so great. And at first, before you could do it on your phone, because this is before I had a phone like that, you just had this little GPS tracker. And you'd carry it, and I'd click it on, walk around, click it off, and then download it to the computer, and it just saved the data. But I couldn't see it. And so I started walking around Baltimore. It was kind of like I needed a devotional practice, essentially. So I needed to do something devotional, which I was also kind of obsessing over at that time. And so and also Baltimore is a tough city. And I just thought, here I am, this white, middle-aged woman, nobody's gonna notice me. I'm just gonna walk around everywhere, and I'm gonna see this city. I'm gonna see all of it. And so I did. And I would go, and I would drive my little car, and I would park somewhere, and I would just walk around and come back to my car. And I did it for 6 months, and then I had this very clever friend who was able to download it to Google Earth, and then I could see how much I had done. I was like, oh, look at that. And I would carry a map, and the only good map you can get is from AAA, and it has the whole city of Baltimore on it. So I had the AAA map, and I would just walk around with the AAA map, and I would never go over the border of the city, which is why, if you look at this, it is exactly the shape of Baltimore, including right down here, Fort Armistead. But it's like, I would go right up to the edges and then walk back in. I would never go over the borders because it would wreck the picture. And I did not walk in the parks, and there's a lot of parks there. I would only walk on the streets, and there's a lot of industrial regions, and you can't go, even though I can walk up and be the dumb white lady and be like, where am I? And I have this map, and but they didn't let me in. So the Chesapeake comes up here into Baltimore, but I couldn't go in. I couldn't go in the
What's it on? Did you make the fabric itself?
So this is again that's made just
that's
exactly like
yeah.
that. So then I took all the tracks because I like to do something heroic and then make as little as possible out of it. And then so I took them and they traced all the rickrack on there, with an overhead projector and just sewed it on, made that. So it was like the commemoration of that thing I did. But yeah, so I walked all over Baltimore for a year, and Baltimore, yeah, and as I said, Baltimore is a tough city, and I didn't get harassed too much. It just I would, if I knew it was a known really bad neighborhood, I would go when it was raining or snowing, and that was my strategy. And I also thought it was a kind of sense of embodying the knowledge of a place, just to go everywhere. And so after that, I'd be like, what? You haven't been back to Fort Armistead? What? You didn't know that. Had this great sense of superiority. So that one happened, and then I'm still on this kind of sewing thing. So I would say, this one's the next in line, which is this big orange piece over here. And it's a memorial piece. And one of my beloveds had died and left 65 Aloha shirts in his wake. And so his daughter and I took charge of all of this stuff. And so a couple years after he died, I made sort of a memorial exhibition, and it was actually in Philadelphia at a gallery. And so this was at the end of the gallery, and then I had made four other pieces that were trees of life, all made out of his Aloha shirts, and neckties. He also left 350 neckties. But these are on the back sides of this are his shirts. They're the shape. Those are his aloha shirts, which makes sense. And it comes from looking out my back window, and I lived in this very tree part of Baltimore, and there are this ginormous oak trees in the backyard, and there was a spot where you looked up sort of into heaven. I'd go, I'm looking at heaven. Oh look. You know, I always loved looking it through that aperture, so it was inspired by that. And I originally thought I would show the aloha shirts, and then I just turned it around and said, no way, man, they look better like that. So and that one's made the same way on that water soluble fabric. Where are we now? Maybe this is also going on. I had made a lot of work that went on the wall for a long time, and I've thought a lot about, you know, over in my lifetime, that when you put things on the wall is sacred space, and there's a thing in art where if you don't touch it, it's more sacred than if it's something that gets touched. And then I just thought, I'm gonna make rugs. And somebody had given me one of those things it's a little cranking machine they use to cut wool to make hooked rugs. And I thought, I don't know how to do that. So I found somebody at a store who showed me how to do it. Like, and it was like second, you know, like I went to her store, I was like, I need to get all this stuff for hooking rugs, what do I use? And she showed me, this woman in Maryland. And so then I thought, okay, what's my imagery? Because as you can see, everything's found, I find it. And so what am I going to do? And I started making rubbings of street drains in Baltimore, because I was living in Baltimore. So these are pretty much all street drains that happen here. And I would make the rubbing, and then I would go back to the site where I made, and then I hooked the rug. This was in the middle of the street in Baltimore. Isn't that very pepperoni-like? Is this the pepperoni right now? And I would photograph them at the place where I had made the rubbing. So I just stick it back on the drain, photograph it, make a postcard, and then this is how I would exhibit it with the postcards. But I've kind of wrecked this because I put all the postcards in it because it's a big wrap. And then these had been exhibited a little bit, but then I found this really fantastic stump, and I made a rubbing of this stump, and I made a big, then I made a rug, took it back, and in Baltimore, trees get really big, and they have those big flares on the bottom of them, and when they get cut down, they just look great. And it was like, oh, it looks like you got it at Spencer Gifts or something like that. It's like, wow. And so that just started on, then all I could see was stumps, and all I could do was make rubbings, and then I would return the hook rug back to the site, make a postcard, and then always exhibit it with the work. And these weren't available for the show, they got sold. They got exhibited a bunch, and they're all in private collections. But they also have a life, and I can talk about this now. They have a life on Etsy too. People have been stealing this idea for a while, and somebody showed me, they're like, look, here's your rugs. And so these are being recreated by people all over the world and sold on Etsy. So at first I ignored it. I was like, how much, I didn't have the energy that I was doing everything. And then at one point I just started writing to these people, because you can do that on Etsy. You can write to the vendors. And I was like, this is my original thing. I have the rubbing from the stump. I can prove it. And they're exactly the same shape. And I was like, and of course nothing happened, but I felt better about it. And then one guy did respond, and then we had a back and forth. He didn't know that it was mine, blah, blah, blah. I was like, well, where do you get your ideas from? But anyway, he said he'd give me 5%. I'm like, I don't know. And then he's like, I said we could maybe do a store together. This sounds like a good thing. But I wanted to control the color because the color was essential to these works. And because the ones that they have are like really ugly. And I was like, no, I can't, I gotta, the color is really important. If you want my name, you gotta use the color. You're just making knockoffs of my work. So we never really did get any consensus around it, but there is one, and it's right. It's on a piece of paper. There's a piece of paper here. Yeah, I'll wave this around because I'm listening. So he sent me this really big one. So the guy Amir in India sent me this really big one. Here I am laying on it. It's much bigger than the original. And it could be yours. It's really beautiful quality. It's wool. And it's big. And I thought I would put it in the show here and put it over on this corner. But then I got it here and it's like, I don't like it. And besides, can you imagine on this hot day if we had that big wool rug? But boy, can you imagine yourself with it? So here I am laying on it. You can pass that around and think about, it's a raffle. For $25, you get a chance of owning that rug. And the glory of supporting Speedwell projects. So thank you, Amir, the knockoff artist, but also, and tell everybody.
How much are the tickets?
$25, baby. Do we have anything else we have to say about that, Bethany?
Well, 25 or 5 for
You can do a 5 for 100? Ooh, yeah, 5 chances for $100. So yeah, and all the money goes to Speedwell. So. And look how good I look laying on it. So yeah, that's just, we did that for scale because that thing's big. The one I made originally was kind of like this big, and that one is like, but they make them in all sizes. So if you don't like that size, you can buy them. I might get 5%. but there was a thing on Marketplace on NPR last night. My friend Piper told me about it. It was all about how people, once your designs start into that system, it's like whack-a-mole to try to get them out. It's like, what are you gonna do? I was like, what am I gonna do? I should be flattered, right? So I talked about the rugs, and so then maybe the piece in here, and these weavings. So there's a rug in here. So the last big show, the last solo show I had was so I went from the drain rugs to the stump rugs, and then I started using my own body because I had seen a show of rugs at the Met, and they were tantric rugs. They were Tibetan tantric rugs, and they were of flayed humans, but they're like cartoonish. It was a shocking show. I was like, what? Because you know those, you might have seen those, like the ones where there's the rugs of tigers that are sort of like flayed tigers, but these were flayed humans, and they're kind of amazing. And I was like, whoa, use your own, like here's your found object, use your own body, Susie. And so I got people to trace me, and I started in on that. And so there's a whole show of them. And had them, it was right before the pandemic, I had a bunch of them on the ground, and I made them in all different ways. And the one in here is like me laying down on the ground, sort of diving. And I wove it on a floor loom, and I used, if you look at it, I used Walmart yarn, acrylic yarn from Walmart, and it's when you look at that yarn in Walmart, you'll see it's red heart yarn, and it's space dyed so that they dye it so that it's like green and then dark green and then brown, and so that is woven with a lot of it. The ground of it is the American flag yarn, which is red, white, and blue, and camouflage yarn. And it was still the Trump era when I was doing it. I went to Walmart today to look for that yarn because I was like, I'm going to show you what it looks like. And I thought, oh, you can't find the American flags. There was camo, but there was, I couldn't find the American flag yarn. I was like, oh, okay, maybe that was, and there's all this other space dyed yarn that was like the figure, but it makes it, when you weave it like that, it stripes up really beautifully. So that is why it's kind of an improvised stripe. And it was so much fun to make. It's like, oh, look at this, I don't have to work very hard and it comes out great. It's just, you know, it's just very thrilling. And then the show that those rugs were in was in this gallery that was 25 feet on the side. It was a big square, 25 feet on the side, and it had this beautiful wooden floor. I was like, perfect for the rugs. Great, that's great. But what am I going to do on the walls? So I wove this piece that's this wide, and it's it actually, I took a class at Haystack a few years ago, and I, you know, because I have taught there a million times, but then I was like, I'm taking a class, and I got into Maryland Institute College of Art, I paid for it, it was great, and I wove, and I didn't know how to weave, but I didn't tell anybody I didn't know, but I had never really used it in my work that much, and so, or really never at all. I just knew how to do it and I knew how to teach it. So then I got into it and I made, and they had a lot of colors, and I have to have, you can't notice, I have to have all the colors, like all the colors. You can't just have like a couple colors. I mean, orange is my new substitute for all the colors, but really, look around here, it's like everything has to have all the colors. And so I got 25 colors, and you can get the standard, it's cheap cotton yarn. And that whole thing is an algorithm of weaving. So I took the 25 colors, and I wove them in one structure, sort of randomly. It's like, you know, like there might be a stripe that's 10, if you know anything about weaving, it's like 10 shots of red, then 10 shots of the next color, then 10 shots of the next color, then 10 shots of the next color. Or sometimes they'll do a little pattern, you know, do another pattern. But I always use the 25 colors in that pattern, and I switch the 25 colors into another pattern, and I switch into another pattern. And it's an incredibly simple system, but I was able to weave 100 feet of it to go all the way around and never repeat anything, which is what's so sort of fascinating. And I thought of it as Joseph Albers and Annie Albers. Joseph Albers' interaction of color and Annie Albers' weaving, so that's why it's the Albers algorithm, Albers S apostrophe, plural possessive. So that's how, I don't know if I explained that, but that's what that piece is. And Katerina Wesleyan told me, don't cut it for that room. Just put it all, you know, just like let it sit down there. Because I was just going to cut it to sit inside that room, but now I get to brag about how it's runs 100 feet. And it can be used in other rooms. But it's also a horizon line, so it's just like a horizon line. That's the landscape. And you know, this, when you put things on the floor, it's the landscape. Also, and then also these hands I made, was also weaving during the pandemic, and so they kind of do this thing where they're like, one is here, and then George, there was the uprisings with George Floyd, and I was working on this whole big project with all these people every week making quilts on Zoom. There's a book about it, you can read about it. And so we were thinking a lot about what was going on, and then there's a piece that looks like a peace sign, but it's really the vaccine sign. I decided, and then there was why did I do this one? I can't remember. It was the second vaccine. It was like this vaccine and this vaccine, which is the what is
Vulcan.
Star Trek. What is
Vulcan.
What's that for?
Spock.
But it's Spock.
Vulcan.
Live long and prosper.
It was live long and prosper, right. It was like that. It was the live long and prosper, and then this is the love sign. So it became like a little story. I didn't know I was doing that, but then I did it. And of course I could use my own arm because there's no one around to trace me. So I could trace my own arm. Now I have two more. I don't know if I started it right. Anyway, this one I did when I came to Maine. I came to Maine last summer and I brought like and I rented a place in Rockland, and I brought the stupidest stuff I could think of. And I really love to do this a little bit, like take, like, oh my God, there's all this stuff you have, I don't know what I'm gonna do with it. And I brought all these doll clothes, and that were my mother's and my grandmother's, mine, my sister's, and I tried to do some with those, and I was making I decided to make cyanotypes on them, and then I didn't like it, and it was stupid, and I also had my mother's handkerchiefs, and so I just started making, I was doing those things, I was making cyanotypes, blah, 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 like it was something to do, and I sort of got myself set up to do it, and so then I started doing this, and you know that cave, or I just maybe did one or something like that, and you know that cave painting, or the cave in Argentina that has all the hands? Cueva de las Manos. Yeah, so then I was like, oh, I'm doing that. And so that's what that is. And then it's sewn on an old family embroidery. So they're all hand stitched down. So it's another kind of memorial piece too, but it was also like make something like now. And then when the show came up, oh no, we didn't talk about this. No, that one. That was actually made. Yeah, and then I can reveal another of my horrible things that I do. That was in the Albany. That was made for the a light well in the Albany, New York airport, and I have shown a few times in that airport, and I love. One of the things that they do is they show local people, and they still, even though I was living in Baltimore, I would come up in the summers, and so they still sort of considered me an Adirondacker, and so I've done a few things, and my last time I had a sabbatical. Yes, I've had a charmed life, I had a sabbatical. I ran into the woman who runs the exhibitions, and they change the exhibitions all the time. So they'll commission artists to do things, and they'll be up for a few years, and then they come down and they get new things, so you don't have the same old stuff all the time. And I was in an exhibition opening, and I ran into the woman who runs the program, and I said, Kathy, I've got a sabbatical, do you have anything for me to do? You know, just because that's kind of the way I operate, and I'm not expecting her to say anything. And she said, yeah, I do, actually. So I went down the next day, looked at the light well, and it's a big circle in the ceiling, and this concourse, and it had like, you know, just sort of like drywall around it. It was like a circle inset, and then there was a gap, and then there was the ceiling. The light came sort of from the sides, and it wasn't that high up. And so you would walk down the concourse, and there was stuff in these light wells. So then I needed to come up with a plan, and there was a small budget. It wasn't very much, but it was enough to keep it going. And so then I went, because the Albany airport, I know this is built on the Shaker, there was a Shaker community right near it. Like, I'm talking to Mainers, so I know you guys know about Shakers. There's a Shaker community, and it was the Albany airport itself was like their agricultural fields at one time. And I knew that, and so I went to the Hancock Shaker village to do a little research, to look at every round thing there was in there. And I was thinking about, they had those round baskets, and I thought maybe I'd do something like that. I had this whole spool knitting idea of making a giant spool knit thing. I did a lot of things, but when I went there, they had a spirit drawing show. And the spirit drawings are these intense, beautiful, colorful drawings made by the Shakers who were plain otherwise. They were modest, and so they didn't exhibit them, they kept them, and then they would just sort of open up the book and say, see, and then close it. You know, it was like this private looking at these things.